Hi there. Thanks for joining me here on Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, the founder of Bare Bones Yoga and the creator of the Momentum Magic Method, the way to become a confident teacher, one who effortlessly walks around the room, shares clear cues, easily builds sequences, and speaks from your heart, sharing authentically with your students. Here on the podcast, you'll discover new and inspiring ways to share your cues and create your sequences. You'll uncover habits and frameworks all designed to empower you so that you can teach in a way that feels authentic and natural. For some episodes, I'll have a guest, and other episodes I'll share with you on my own, and in each one, you'll always get action steps and takeaways you can apply right away to your teaching. In addition to the podcast, follow me on Instagram and TikTok for daily videos. You'll see a link on both of my profiles, my Stan Store link. Click it and unlock ways you can get the support you need to be the teacher of your dreams. You'll find links to the podcast, my free ebook, and other resources to help you be the best teacher you can be. You'll also find the link to my signature program, the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint Learning Program, and you can see if you qualify to enroll. So with that, let's get on with today's show. Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 344. I'm recording this intro on April 10th, 2024, and this episode will go live on April 14th, 2025. So I'm always curious to know when you're listening in the now times or sometime in the future. So you can always send me a DM on Instagram and let me know when you listen to the show and obviously what you thought of the episode that you listened to. In this episode today, I'm going to introduce you to a really, really interesting guest, and I'm going to do that in a minute. I just wanted to pop on first and not only tell you a little bit about our guest, but also just put a call out there to new yoga teachers who want to learn anatomy, who are ready to learn anatomy. You're the kind of teacher who is out there teaching at least one class a week, and you realize, oh my goodness, I really didn't learn anatomy in my 200-hour teacher training, and I want to do it. I don't want to have to figure it out by myself. So I'm looking for a way to learn it, but fast and easy and fun. And I have a new program called the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator. And all I'm going to say for now is that. So if the idea interests you and you are that kind of person, send me a DM to my Instagram and just let me know you heard this. You can include the word Yoga Anatomy Accelerator, and I'll know exactly what you're talking about, and I'll tell you more. So now that we're done with that, what I'd love to do is introduce you to today's guest. Today's guest is Billy Wynne. I had the opportunity to chat pretty extensively with Billy last week or this week, and Billy is the author of The Empty Path, Finding Fulfillment Through the Radical Art of Lessening. And I want you to just first think about how profound that title is. When I heard about it and saw the title, The Empty Path, Finding Fulfillment Through the Radical Art of Lessening, my body just relaxed. Just the thought of that, just the art of lessening just gave me a moment to pause and just really ask myself, am I living in a way that's adding a bunch of stuff on, or am I living in a way that's allowing me to simplify so I can really experience life? We talk extensively about his book, what inspired him to create his book. He is a student of Buddhism and mindfulness for 30 years. He received meditation teaching certification under Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach, and also from the Zen Center of Denver, where he now teaches classes and serves on the board. we go into the trajectory of how he ended up writing this book, which is pretty interesting considering he has a long career in healthcare policy and advocacy. So that was sort of a surprise to me. I mean, I wasn't expecting to go into that topic, but we definitely did, in service to really just understanding what brought him to the point where he felt compelled, felt inspired to share the wisdom in this book. So, yoga teachers, I know you're going to love this because this touches on subjects that are near and dear to our heart. If you're listening and you're not a yoga teacher, this is also just inspiring content around how to live your best life in a way that you feel fulfilled and happy and joyful and present, all the things that certainly as yoga teachers we talk about. And this is just an amazing opportunity for us to start to put it into practice. So with that, let's go on to my conversation with Billy Wynne. Hi there.
Hi,
How
how
are
are
you?
you? Well, I'm good. Thanks very much for having me.
Of course. Well, thanks for being here. I'm really psyched to have our conversation. I've been doing my homework and learning more about you and your book, and I'm just feeling like it's just such an interesting topic and something that I actually have not covered on the podcast
Great.
in over 300 episodes. So I'm really excited to have us dive into it.
Sweet. Thank you. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Awesome. So why don't you where are you coming in from?
Denver, Colorado, just south of Denver.
That's
Yeah.
right. I remember that. I'm in Boston,
Yeah.
where it is raining.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I hope
It's got kind of
isn't.
nice here. It's a bit
Yeah,
spring here today, which is good.
yeah. I'll bet. Denver always ranks high on places that people want to live. It seems to have a really nice vibe to it. How long have you lived there?
Since 2009. Yeah,
Oh,
we moved here quite a while ago. So it's definitely home.
yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and I saw in the notes, and I definitely want to talk to you a little bit about. I remember reading you had started a small business in the area at one point, so I definitely want to dive into that.
Yeah.
So, if you're ready, we can just kind of get started.
Okay, great. Let's
All
do
right,
it.
perfect. So let's start out for the listeners, giving them an idea of who you are and what you do. You can sort of take that any way you'd like. I definitely want to go into the book and learn more about that. Let's just
Yeah.
start anything that comes to mind to give the person listening an idea of who you are.
Sure. Well, thank you. And I guess I'm a dad to two children and a husband and a son, and we'll get into that, and a brother. My career has been in healthcare policy consulting, starting in Washington, D.C., and then carrying over to here in Colorado. And that's really been the my day job, as I like to say, and we'll talk about some of my other experiences professionally, including the alcohol-free bar that my
Yeah.
wife and I opened here in Denver while I was doing my day job, which was part of the challenge that I realized and became really the beginning of the book. We'll come back to that. And I am a mindfulness meditation teacher. I got certified really during COVID to do that under a program offered by Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach to, notable figures in the meditation space. And I'm a Zen Buddhist. I practice often at the Zen Center of Denver, and that is my kind of personal
Mhm.
spiritual tradition. And have been doing that for about 8 years, so a little over 8 years. And
Mhm.
that's also kind of fed into the book as well. A lot of the Buddhist ideas that I talk about there come from my practice with the Zen Center. So
Yeah.
that's me in a nutshell.
Got it. Now, you started out by saying that you worked in healthcare policy, and then you went off and talked about, some of the other things that are more in, I guess I could say, the wellness space. It's just, I sort of see those two parts of you as being different. And so I'm curious,
Yeah,
I'm curious,
yeah,
you could sort of say under the umbrella of health.
yeah,
However, healthcare policy is a very different expression of someone's passion about health than meditation and opening a sober bar and things we'll talk about, certainly the writing of the book, the contents of the book. So tell me a little bit about how did that come to be?
Yeah, so I think it's true. There's not a sort of linear correlation between the two, at least in my own life. Although the roads have started to merge as I advance in my life, and I can talk about that. But and I talk about my career in the book, kind of the 1.0 version of my career as a health policy consultant and lobbyist, starting in DC. And then when we moved here to Denver in 2009, flying back, I had a condo in DC. I was, basically commuting to Washington. So, very busy, very ambitious, and working in the health policy space, has been, rewarding, both, personally and professionally and financially and all those things. It's really been a privilege, and I don't, kind of begrudge it at all. It has included, working on behalf of a wide variety of kind of healthcare organizations and stakeholders. Increasingly, and I'm still involved with this work. I'm still the majority owner of my health policy consulting firm that I started a couple years ago. We work with foundations like the Commonwealth Fund and Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and some other, more clearly mission-oriented work, while we like to believe that we are aligned to some degree or another with the mission of all of our clients who fill different aspects of the healthcare continuum. But I do say in the book that the healthcare system, and to some degree, my contribution to it, is a kind of classic example of the mooring in the book that I talk about as kind of part of the problem of our suffering. And most of us by now probably realize that our healthcare system is more than twice as expensive as any other developed country. We have worse outcomes. I won't give everybody a lecture on healthcare policy, but we don't have a great one, is the truth. Whatever your political predispositions are, it is a fact that the US has a broken healthcare system. And the way we seem to keep trying to solve it is by adding more spending, more tests, more technology, more, and that's probably not the answer that I'm coming to later in life with regard to our own personal lives and also with regard to the US healthcare system. So that too has been that career has been a learning experience for me.
Mhm. So would you say that, and I can certainly relate, I had 20 years in corporate healthcare, both starting out as a clinician and then moving to the managed care space, working for a consulting firm, having like a C-level job. And then I took my first yoga class in 1999 and I
Yeah,
said, oh, wow, this is what I want to do. And
yeah,
how am I going to extricate myself from this corporate career that I thought was a match for my identity and now identify as a yoga teacher? Like, how is that going to work? So,
yes.
not about me today, it's about you, but I'll just say I can relate to what you're saying. So, I guess in part because of what I was thinking about my own experience when I was listening to you, is it safe to say that there was sort of a, and maybe this isn't the right word, sort of a disillusionment to some extent, and you were searching for more? And is that how you found Buddhism? Or describe a little bit about that shift from what you were very ensconced in to Buddhism, your interest in that, and then eventually where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So, and I think with a lot of people, it's been kind of an evolution, and the interweaving of my professional evolution and my personal evolution, is thick. So they're closely intertwined. And for me, part of it was uh, with the arrival of my son, my second child, into our lives, that I realized I had a problem with anger, and I had a problem with turning away from my life. Including with alcohol, and the recognition of and confrontation with these aspects of my life unfolded over the many years to follow. But what I did then was get counseling for anger management, and I eventually found a life coach who continues to be a very close friend, and Kate Gerstberger is her name, and some of her teachings are included in my book, especially the teachings around codependence and the chapter about love and relationships. But also I started doing mindfulness meditation, and I got deeper into mindfulness meditation. And then a little over 8 years ago is when I joined the Zen Center of Denver. And then, meanwhile, my career was gradually I wanted to reduce the time I was spending in Washington away from my family. I wanted to reduce my stress. And I was willing to make some financial compromises in order to accomplish that. So I started empowering my team. I started paying people basically to do the work that I could do myself, but that I didn't want to spend all my time doing myself. And really, I was very, needless to say, privileged to be able to do these things, and I had some degree of success in my career and was able to hire people and all those things that I know not everyone can do. But I did choose to forego kind of the maximization, of my financial enrichment and my time spent on my job and all of those things in favor of starting to reconnect with my family and, my Buddhist path and, ultimately confronting my use of alcohol and all of those different things. So it really was kind of dealing with my personal issues, shall we say, that was really, kind of step by step with my softening my attachment to my career and leading to this path where I still am involved with my healthcare policy business, but I have had time to get certified as a mindfulness teacher and, spend a lot more time on my Zen path and write this book and do those other things that are meaningful for me.
Got it. So it sounds like you intentionally re-engineered your life.
I think that's fair. Yes. And I have been kind of creative with my career. So leaving, I worked for the Senate from 2006 to 2008, which was really kind of the beginning of my, springboard for my career. And so to have that and enter into the Washington policy sphere as kind of this shiny new toy, I don't think that's bragging. I mean, that's kind of what happens when you're in a position like that for the government. And so, but 6 months later, we moved to Denver. And so that was very unique at the time, to be a Washington policy lobbyist, basically, and not live in Washington. And so, but that was what we wanted to do for personal reasons and raise our family here and that sort of thing. And I was willing to make some compromises in terms of travel. But then, I shifted the focus of my work and my company's work away from lobbying, to be specific, to policy analysis and other ways of generating value for clients that didn't require me to be in Washington, basically. And we still have a strong footprint in Washington. We have people who are there, but really many of them don't need to be, is the case. They basically work from home. So long-winded answer to your question of yes, I have been trying to engineer a career that suits me, and I've been privileged to be able to do that in many ways and to be successful, and have material comfort, but also have a lot of time with my family and travel with them a lot and have some personal pursuits that have been, a lot of fun and rewarding.
Great. That's amazing. I mean, a lot of people probably have visions throughout their life of ways they'd like to engineer it, but they're not able to actually make it come to life. And it sounds like you've been able to do that. So I guess one of the other things that comes to my mind is, now you have this tangible um, uh, illustration of a lot of things that you've learned and you've gone through in this book. And it's got this very, sort of interesting premise, the empty path, which in a way, when I saw it, I thought was kind of paradoxical, because in the emptiness is sort of the fulfillment, sort of the everything is in the empty, but you have to sort of get empty. Like I sort of read it in the verse, like I read it literally, and then I saw the paradoxical side of it and thought, oh, as a yoga teacher, I can see that in the emptiness is the everythingness, right? So so tell me a little bit about how did you come up with the idea to write the book? What was sort of driving you to share the message in the book? And maybe we should start with what is the message of the book, and then we can talk about some of the mechanics of how it came to be.
Sure. So, well, and they're deeply intertwined. And I kind of start the book by telling the story, and it really relates to the alcohol-free bar of Awake and the idea that it wasn't good enough for me to quit drinking alcohol. It wasn't good enough for me to actually open an alcohol-free bar. I had to franchise, after like literally a couple weeks of success, I was getting licensed to offer franchises in 25 states. And this is just me, more and more and more and more, and never, fully stopping to appreciate what was good enough and to really focus on it so that it could succeed. Because pretty quickly after we opened the bar. This is in the spring of 2021. COVID restrictions were lifted in Denver, and that the initial enthusiasm from the audience and the local press, et cetera, started to wane. And my lack of experience I had no experience in the bar restaurant business, started to shine through after the initial enthusiasm waned. And so then we were in the slog that many people who've been in the industry know it to be, a very stressful, very time-consuming work to try to keep this thing afloat. And so it was in the summer of 22 is when, and I talk about this experience in the book, of driving home from the bar late at night, my knee is on the wheel and I'm using, I'm texting or responding to a Google review, and I have this thought that I could die. And then quickly this thought kind of surprises me that says maybe that would be okay. And I never had suicidal thoughts before. And so that really shocked me. And ultimately it was extremely beneficial to see that, because 2 weeks later I closed the bar and my life began again, really, is how I think of it. And so what that taught me was that I had, despite my Buddhist practice, despite my mindfulness practice, despite, finding a lot of joy and comfort in my life, it's like a wheel, and these themes keep coming back, is something that I try to communicate to people. And what I realized was that, I had yet again fallen into the belief that I needed to be more in order to be a good person, to be satisfied and fulfilled and happy in my life. And it's something that we are, and this is getting to the central theme of the book, that, from the moment we're born, we're told that we have to learn more, be more, do more, earn more, achieve more, get more fame, get more relationships, get more wisdom. And that it's these things that are outside of us that we have to go get in order to be fulfilled and happy in our lives. And so what the Awake experience taught me was that it's actually the opposite of that. It's actually realizing from the very beginning that we are completely enough. We are inherently sufficient. We are everything that we ever should or could be, just as we are, right? And that is always true. In a way, it's true before we're born, and it'll be true after we die. It is the fundamental truth of existence. And so reconnecting with that, which I believe we know in our bones and marrow, it's like in our cells, but we are so busy that we miss it and we forget it. So reconnecting with that, and the Buddhist teachings around emptiness are a nice pathway, certainly not the only one, but a nice path to follow, to reawaken to that fundamental truth. And so that's really, I closed the bar a couple weeks later, was feeling like a new person, and then a couple weeks after that, I'm meditating in my closet. The sun comes up. I meditate in the morning, and it faces east. The window is east facing, and the sun comes up, and it's on my cheek, and I'm just like, this is all that I ever have needed. What a shame that I've been running around in circles for 45 years. Thinking that the truth and peace and happiness is somewhere outside of me. It's just right here. It's simple as can be. It's right underneath our feet, and we just fail to realize it. And so that's the message that I'm hoping
Yeah,
to share with people.
I love that. And I guess as I'm hearing you talk, it makes me wonder, for somebody listening to this right now, they're hearing what you're saying, and there's, I'm sure, elements that they desire that are attractive to them. But at the face of everything that's constantly being thrown at us on social media, on television, so how do we balance that?
Yeah. So I think that the message I want to convey is that they're not separate. So we're not talking about, whatever your relationships are, or your career ambitions are, or your the things you do for fun, whether it's watching TV or looking at your phone, as we all do to some degree. It's not saying those are bad. It's actually saying put down the idea of good and bad to some degree, and acknowledge what is here and what it is that you are doing. And we can change our relationship to how we relate, to those things. So it is say the thing that changes is not whether or not we are going to do it necessarily, but we give up the idea that doing it is what's going to make us happy, right? And that we are fulfilled and whole from the beginning, and that we can approach the activities of our life, both the joyful things and the more difficult things, from a posture that says we are already enough. We're grateful for our lives just as they are, and that we can then move into the space of our workday or our relationship with our partner or our, you know, the different things that are coming up in our lives. And we're no longer chasing after them and anxious about them and you know, craving, you know, satisfaction from them as something that we need, right, in order to be whole. We start from the place of wholeness and then we proceed into these activities. And then we're lighter, we're easier, we're less attached to a specific outcome that we might, you know, believe is the perfect thing that it needs to be. And we can, you know, acknowledge our mistakes, and we, you know, we're more flexible, we're kind of have this improvisational mindset about our lives, which is, I think, again, back to your point, it's like we're trained to think it's kind of a zero-sum game, and that the time we spend meditating or the more flexible, open, creative mindset we take to our job, for example, is at the expense of our performance and at the expense of our success. But in truth, the beauty is that actually, I believe it's by adopting that mindset of sort of inherent fulfillment and satisfaction that is more likely to create success in these pursuits of our life, because the shell of like anxiety, right, and craving, and like take a career, you know, kind of context, for example, if there's like a coworker who's disagreeing with me, well, then they're like in my way, right? They're in the way of my success and they're holding me back, and I am, by golly, gonna, you know, defeat them, is a very natural mindset that we can have. And the other mindset is to say, you know, I am whole and complete from the beginning. So are they, right? We have a difference of opinion or approach about this particular thing, but like there's, you know, the idea that we're kind of in conflict and that we're, you know, we're in this kind of battle, and this applies to all kinds of different contexts of our life, is false, and is actually what's holding us back, right? That mentality that we might be bringing to that situation is what is causing us to fail, rather than that other person and our ideas about that other person that are causing us to fail.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm listening though, I'm thinking, and this sort of speaks to what you were talking about when you were talking about your own path, and you know, with alcohol and anger and some of the epiphanies you had around that in your life. It makes me think about everything that you said. I'm a yes for that. And also, I know at an identity level, if at an identity level, let's just take anger. I am an angry person and I'm very reactive. And like when I go into Starbucks and there's no seats, I get very angry. Or when I have that coworker that I'm head to head with, I get very angry. You know, that anger, while anger isn't really an identity, there's something most likely more deep-seated that's causing me to be angry, something that I associate with maybe trauma in my past. How do I shift from that identity to taking on more of the kind of identity that you describe? Is it something I'm doing? Is it meditation, you know, in terms of 3D practices and habits? What am I actually doing, you know, to help me shift? Because someone listening right now might associate with what you describe as being something they aspire to be. And at the same time, they may be hearing you and thinking, I don't know how to get there. What's the bridge to get me there?
Yeah. Wow. Well, what a great question. I'll try to answer it. And that is hopefully what the book will help people do. And so the one first way to answer that is to turn toward our authentic life experience. So if we're getting angry in Starbucks, which maybe we all have to some degree or another, or some other coffee shop if we don't like Starbucks, but you know, because of some delay or some person who's not being polite or whatever it might be, it's like, okay, this is what is happening here, right? This is my authentic, valid life experience of this thing, and can I be with it for a moment before I rush in to judge whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, to be cultivated or avoided, you know, all the things, the concepts and judgments and preconceptions rushing in, which is kind of the heart of mindfulness. And there's kind of two wings of mindfulness. And the first is to just be aware of something, you know, as it is here now, and to trust our authentic, valid experience of things. Is, you know, like, there's an easy misperception and risk with the kinds of teachings that I'm presenting, mindfulness, Buddhism, and so forth, that it's about ignoring reality, right? That it's about like, but it's about a hilltop meditating, la la la, in the clouds, and the real world is like getting in the way. Well, that is not the path, at least not for me. The path is to turn toward what is actually happening in our real life, in the dirty corner of the coffee shop. And I'm having these thoughts, and it's like, what do I do? Well, the first step is to be open to what is happening and to not just rush away from it mentally or physically and say, I feel unpleasant right now, so therefore I'm going to go turn the radio on and chug my coffee and forget about it. Right. So what actually, if we have the opportunity to observe that we got angry in this example, then another way to do it is to say, isn't that interesting that I'm here with my coffee at Starbucks and this total stranger has triggered me into an anger state? That's interesting. What happened there? And it includes both kind of the details. What did that person actually do? And maybe they're wearing something. We probably have applied all these ideas about this person to that person when, in fact, we probably know absolutely nothing about that person, right? Except how they appear to us that moment. And so that's one thing to look at. It's like I have all these judgments and ideas about this person. I'm probably starting to decide what political party they're a part of. All this kind of stuff that just rushes in instinctively. Is to just try to hit the pause on that and examine it. And so where is this coming from? And why is it? And that's in a moment. Now, of course, it's a longer life work to say, okay, like you said, it probably is the case that my experience of that moment is somehow related to, my mom yelling at me when I was 6, kind of stuff. And so I'm not qualified to help people unpack that, but I do encourage people to take a look at that and get professional help if they need it. And we all have, powerful, many would say traumatic childhood experiences that are manifesting in our life today, whether we like it or not. And so, yes, peeling back the layers of that to go all, even back into childhood is also an important practice. But it's interesting you use the word identity, because also that's kind of at the heart of what I'm trying to relay is to, and one of the exercises in the book is to sit down and start to scribble all the different identities that we have. I'm a son or a daughter or what have you. I'm this or that. I have this career. I have these aspirations. I have these personality traits. I have these things that I do from, it goes on and on and on and on. And you probably will not stop writing if you start really having an open, I have my name, my social security number, all this kind of stuff, my memories, and all these different identities and aspects of our identity that we have come to assume are us, right? And so, and we assume that others it's the same. They have all these different features of them, and that makes them them. Well, if we take a minute and we look at all these different aspects of us, then it is hard to identify the thing that is us, that makes us us, right? So are we our physical body, like are we our skin, are we our bones? Probably not. Are we our name and our birth date and our social security number? Probably not. Are we our thoughts and our memories? And so we go item by item and deconstruct this sort of conventional view we have of ourselves. And you keep peeling back the layers of the onion, and you may find that there's nothing actually there. This is getting to the heart of emptiness. It's like these ideas we have about it, which is kind of the beginning of separation and this kind of zero-sum game that we tend to live in. It's like, I'm over here, I'm me, I have this identity, it's fixed, right? And it's and you're over there, and you have your identity, and your identity is kind of fixed, kind of has this sort of permanency and tangibility to it. And that's how we all assume that how the world works. And it's also true for like this water bottle here, and everything around me, we think of this way. But if we examine it patiently, I think we'll find that it's not true. It's not the way that things are. They don't have this embedded permanent identity, nothing around me and me, myself, and those around me. I don't. So what then it's like, okay, well, that's kind of an interesting thought experiment, but what does that actually mean? Well, it can completely transform how we relate to our life, right? Because if we have been assuming all these, kind of hard and concrete identities to all the things around us, we are attached to these ideas that we have of them. We start to expect them to behave and respond in certain ways. And that's kind of how we conceive of our lives. Well, when we realize that that's actually, a mistaken view of things, then our preconceptions and our attachments start to soften.
Mm,
And we start to get a little more open-minded and open-hearted about what the next moment is going to bring. And we start to question all these presuppositions we have about the world around us. Not in kind of, a conspiratorial way, but just in a relaxation of this fixed view that we have. And this is particularly true in our relationships. And another exercise or technique that I like to use and that I relay in the book is like, um, you know, we think we know so much about the people around us. My wife is like outside this door behind me. So like, there's a great example, right? I think I know so much about her. And those thoughts I have about who I think she is dictate often, or I let them dictate my behavior toward her and my expectations toward her and like how I think she's going to respond. It's like, oh, I got to do this because then she's going to do that. And if she's going to do this, then I got to do that. And that's kind of how we're constructing this relationship. Well, it's fun. It's a fun and valuable experience, I think, to come into an encounter with someone we are in relationship with and try to forget everything we knew about them,
mm,
right? Treat it as a blank slate
mm,
and forget the idea that we know how they're going to respond and we know so much about their identity and who they are. And then how do we treat them?
mm,
And how do we respond to how they treat us in return? And it's probably very different from our
mm.
conventional mode of being in that relationship. So anyway, this is the beginning of the unfolding of the empty path. And it's really about softening our attachment to all these ideas we have about the way that the world is and should be,
Mm.
to start to think about life a different way.
Yeah, it reminds me as you were talking. Well, first of all, I had a literal conversation with my boyfriend this morning that falls right into this category because he texted me when I was at Starbucks and said, FYI, I'm going to get my hair cut at 11. And I got home before he left. And I said, because he had just recently gotten his hair cut. And so I said to him, you're getting your hair cut again. And he snapped at me and he said, I knew you were going to say that. I wasn't even going to text you that I was going to get my hair cut because the last time I got my hair cut, you questioned why I was getting my hair cut again so soon. And I was like, hey, take a breath. It's just curious to me that it seems like every 3 weeks you get your hair cut. And
Uh-huh.
I don't care how often you get your hair cut, but it was interesting that he had this predisposition that I was
Yeah,
going to question why he was getting his hair
yeah,
so soon because I had
yeah,
questioned it before. And
yeah.
when I actually sit back and examine it, I was sort of questioning it. And why was I doing that? Like,
Sure. Yeah,
why was I putting him on the defensive, which I kind of was when I take a moment and think about how I even brought it up. So
sure.
it's one thing that came to my mind when you were discussing that he had sort of a fixed expectation of how I would react. And interestingly enough, I sort of reacted in the way that he expected, which now sort of ingrains in his mind. So I bet the next time he goes to get his haircut, he's not going to tell me. I'll get back to you and let you know if he just
Yeah, please. Some
especially.
homework.
Yeah.
Yeah, good
But
luck.
the other thing I was thinking is I sort of quickly read this book by Carol Dweck called The Growth Mindset. And it reminded me of
Uh-huh.
the concept of what you're talking about,
Yeah,
growth versus fixed. And
yeah.
a lot of the one-on-one work I do with yoga teachers, because interestingly enough, teaching yoga is very triggering because when you walk into the room, you don't really know these people. You're there to
Mm,
lead them through this time-tested practice that's been around for
mhm,
thousands of years. I mean, you kind of get
mhm,
it from the meditation place. It can be very triggering to your identity. Who am I to be doing this? Am I
mm.
qualified? Are they going to like me? All that sorts of
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
So, oftentimes when I work with teachers, I give them little experiments to do in their classes to sort of test their identity ideas about themselves. Like,
Mm,
I'm not a confident person. I'm never going to feel confident teaching my classes. So we'll do little experiments and then they'll get back to me with how it goes. So it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is giving people that moment of pause when they would normally react and just reiterate, this is the kind of person I am. And instead, in that moment of pause, almost ask yourself, is it possible for me to see this situation differently?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting you use pause. So like Tara Brach talks about the sacred pause, kind of the space between reactivity and
Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
So reactivity is in the mode of like, well, this person did this, so I have to do that. And it's like, it's like kind of the default mode.
Right.
of approach to our life. And it's, if we could just grab a moment, a breath, or, sometimes we can recenter, right? And we can kind of come back to our heart, and how we, prefer to come forth in the world. And then we're responding. And
Yeah.
part of that is acknowledging that we are free. This is kind of one of the teachings I get to in the book, that yes, we are deeply wired to react in certain ways to our external circumstances, but also we are making a choice, right? So we can, at the end of the day, we are choosing how we react to certain things. And so to find that breath of that pause at the moment, to kind of make that choice in a conscious way rather than in an unconscious reactive way, is right at the heart of this. And it's not easy to do because we are so, again, just deeply trained. And not part of what I want to say is like, it's okay, it's because part of this practice, I've had this in some of the mindfulness courses I've taught. Some students have very poignantly brought up this something that I think all of us on this path confront at some point, where if we have just a glimpse of the different way of being, where we are, having a more authentic and mindful response to our life, we realize just how reactive we've been most of the time, right? And so there's a sadness to that. There's a poignancy to that I think we kind of need to turn toward and confront. And so, but acknowledging, that there's a different path is really at the beginning of it, because it does include some acknowledgement that we've made mistakes. And St. John of the Cross says to become that which we are not, we have to go by a way that we know not. So embedded in here is a realization that our prior techniques have not served us. And that the reactive mode, even though we believe it is the way to get from A to B and where we want to go, is really just holding us back from being, having a happy and fulfilled life. So there is a real transformation, that we open ourselves up to, it is available to us.
Yeah, I think about, there's a whole rabbit hole of TikTok videos of people reacting in public situations to one another
Oh,
in negative
I'm
ways. And I think
sure.
for every thing that happens, if one of the two people would have just taken 30 seconds and
Yeah.
feel their feet on the floor, take a deep breath in and out, and either leave or whatever, change the tone of voice or whatever it is, so many things could be avoided that make it to the interwebs that are just awful descriptions and illustrations of human behavior. So I have a question we haven't really literally touched on. I'm just kind of curious, because when I first looked at the name of the book and then the subtitle, Finding Fulfillment Through the Radical Art of Lessening, it sort of reminded me of, I don't know if this is like a way of living or another kind of maybe even related approach to life, people that are called minimalists, and to do with the material aspects of one's life. So is there a
Yeah.
relationship between what you're espousing and that? Is it different? Tell me what you think about that.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because it does get kind of right to the heart of the book as well. And the short answer is that how the art of lessening applies to someone's life is really up to them to find out. So the book doesn't say, quit your job or leave your, it doesn't tell people what to do about their lives. What it encourages is to be with the aspects of our lives in a different way. And that probably will include some degree of simplification, of our lives. But that's not the prescription. The prescription is to be with the experiences of our lives in a way that says, I am approaching this as a fundamentally whole and complete person, right? I am actually right now already everything that I ever need to be, in the truest sense, in the deepest sense. And now I'm going to decide what I want to do, right? And I might or might not keep my career. I might or might not stay in the relationships that I'm in. I might or might not, add that third hobby that I've been wanting to add. But whatever I decide, I'm going to come to it with the knowing that that thing, that external thing, that aspect of my life is not what is going to make me happy and fulfilled. Nothing external to me can make me happy or fulfilled. I am already happy and fulfilled from the inside out. And so that's lessening. And then so the more practically speaking, what that equates to is this softening of our attachments, our ideas, our expectations, our judgments of all these things around us, because we are expecting them to do something for us that they actually cannot do, right? No other person can make us happy. No other, material item can make us happy and fulfilled, right? And it is the belief in that is the cause of our disappointment and suffering, tragically, because it is how we were trained to think. So it is the release of that and the softening of that and coming back to things as they are in the deep kind of inherent gratitude for them. That's what the lessening is about. And then we can find out, as only one person can do for themselves, not for me to know, what we want to lessen and what we want to pursue in terms of the activities of our life.
I mean, one of the things that you haven't mentioned when you were just talking that popped into my brain is money, right?
Sure.
And I
Yeah,
think
it's a big
about,
thing.
the idea of what you're describing, that idea that I have everything that I need, and sort of I am a whole person regardless of how much money I have. How is that possible to shift one's mindset, especially if one's in a situation where they don't have enough money to pay their bills? Or, I, as an entrepreneur for a long, long time, after being in the corporate world for a long, long time, have been, at one point I was in an entrepreneurial training program with lots of entrepreneurs, none of whom were yoga teachers. Everybody was in different areas. But the idea of like making sales, selling your program, like each of us had different programs, and we would have Zoom calls, and people would be in tears, like, I haven't made my numbers this week, or I haven't sold, or I've had all these sales calls, but they're just not converting. And because I had an opportunity in this program to sort of witness many different entrepreneurs and their reaction to not being successful according to the standard they had set for themselves. How do you sort of manage that in the context of what you're offering? Like, what would you say maybe to one of those people that was in that struggle scenario? The reality is this, and at the same time, I'm supposed to believe that I'm whole. Like, how do I get?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for asking that question. The first thing is for me to emphasize that nothing in the book is intended to deny that people need to have their basic material needs met. I mean, billions of people in the world don't have access to clean water, for Pete's sake. So I'm not here to say that they shouldn't have that, right? And that effort shouldn't be exhausted to bring people, and to create in the world a place where we have our basic needs met, and that we are free to pursue more than that, and material comfort and luxury, which is fine and wonderful to enjoy if you have that opportunity. And so the message and the teaching is that wherever we are, whoever we are, whether we are, a gazillionaire, or we are struggling to have our basic material needs met, we are a perfectly valid and beautiful human being. I mean, that's the basic message, right? And we can know that even if we're struggling, and we can know that even if we're trapped in greed, and even though we got $1 gazillion, we want $1 gazillion more, which is often where that path leads. So I believe very, very passionately, and I try to hold myself accountable to this, and I know I don't always do, but if this teaching doesn't work for the most suffering and most desperate among us, then it's worthless, right? Because I believe it is universally true and accessible. And so if it can't matter to the person who doesn't have access to clean water, then I'm throwing it in the trash. Okay, it has to connect with everyone. It has to be true for everyone in order to be true for me. So that's how I offer it, and I think it undoubtedly, it is a privilege for me to have 30 minutes every morning to meditate. It's a privilege for me to go to the Zen Center of Denver. It's a privilege to me to eat. I don't have to worry about my food and water and clothing and housing is coming from. I have financial distress, but, or stresses, not distress, but stresses, of course, like, but, it is interesting that no matter how much we have, we seem to keep having financial stress. So, that's a practice in and of itself. But I do, there are parts of the book where I'm kind of like, let's come back to earth and like, let's be real and say, it's undeniable that somebody in my situation with all the material comfort I have has more opportunity to kind of calm my mind and maybe awaken and reconnect to this fundamental truth that I believe is here for all of us. So that's also true. And it's like, well, what do we do about that? And how do we contribute to a world where people have the opportunity to be at peace, even in the face of suffering and hardship? And that is a question that we'll all have to answer, or at least that I'm inviting people to answer what that call means to them in their life and what their capacities and resources are to do something about that. So on the one hand, yes, material reality of our lives is clearly an undeniable factor in our ability to have some peace and calm in our day-to-day experience. But also, yes, I believe that the fundamental truth of this teaching is available to everyone, who has, a moment, to access it. So.
Well, I mean, I think part of the problem is a lot of people don't know how to do what you describe. Like, even if just at the level of meditation, I mean, how many people say, I would love to meditate, but I'm not the kind of person who can. Again, that identity thing. And I think about, I mean, you mentioned teaching meditation. I think about kids in schools, what an opportunity it would be for us to be teaching children meditation right from when they're young, as a way to equip them with a lot of the emotional intelligence that is part of what you describe when you then think about living out in the world and interacting with people, let alone interacting with oneself. But if people don't know how to do it, we're just generating generations and generations of reactive human beings, because that's, like you said, from a nervous system perspective, that's how we're built. I mean, I have the skeleton behind me. It obviously doesn't show the nerves, but part of the infrastructure of the body and the role of the nervous system is to protect us. And so sort of baked into our humanness that we are reactive. So without learning how to do it, the meditation or whatever technique, how are we supposed to? So that's just my little soapbox statement. I mean, so maybe about you're teaching people, who are these people? How are they? Are they college students, did you say?
Not usually, no. It's a wider, it's an audience. They tend to be, adults or what have you. Although, my teacher, Peggy, is a pediatrician and teaches mindfulness-based stress reduction to teenagers. So I want to know more about how she does that. But two things. One is that, and this is a big, I'm studying a lot of Buddhism and Zen Buddhism right now, and for whatever it's worth of interest to folks, is like, this is a huge kind of debate that's played out within Buddhism over millennia, which is the kind of apparent contradiction between the fundamental truth of who we are and the need to practice, meditation or whatever, at least in the Buddhist context, is the kind of direction to do that. And where I'm at and where I resonates and I believe kind of, makes sense to me is that, what I want your listeners and audience to know is that they are whole and complete from the very beginning, whether or not they have time to meditate and realize it, on a day-to-day basis. Like that's at the heart of it. You don't have to do anything, right? That is the pitfall. We immediately kind of fall into the ditch when we get into the mindset of, I got to do that thing in order to be this person. And that's the fundamental mistake. So that's something I want to reiterate. Now, it is helpful to meditate, right? And it can be a beautiful and, life-affirming and joyful practice. And so the thing that I would say in response to your question is that for those who want to get started, the thing that the number one rule that I urge is to forget everything you thought you knew about what meditation is supposed to be. So forget about the cover of the magazine with the person on the hilltop in the clouds. Like, forget about the idea of suppressing all of your thoughts, please just forget about that. Is not what meditation is about. our mind secretes thoughts, right? It's like a gland. It just keeps, and that is, there's no way to stop that. So the purpose of meditation is not to stop thoughts. It's to be with our actual life experience as it is and as it's arising for us. So, if a thought arises, as it will inevitably, then we can acknowledge that and we can say, okay, thought is here, or whatever, the practice might instruct. And then naturally, rather than attaching to the thought, and so then building out like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to have for breakfast, and this is how I'm going to talk to my coworker today, and directing our thoughts and attaching to them down that path. Once we realize we're doing that, we can just pause, acknowledge that's what's been happening, and then come back to our breath, or whatever kind of the center practice is, and doing that over and over and over again, and sitting down for 10 minutes and realizing that we spent the 10 minutes planning our day, that is the practice. That is what meditation is like for everybody that I know. It does get a little easier with time. Those brief moments of ease and relaxation that we might, get whiffs of at the beginning do grow and become more common. So there is kind of a promise, a path that can yield these benefits. But at the same time, I guess the last thing I want to say about it is that John Kabat-Zinn, who's a forerunner of
I live in
American.
Boston, so he lives
Oh,
in
there
here.
you go. Yeah. So the mindfulness, he invented mindfulness-based stress reduction and studied it extensively. And he and others have really, to the degree we have really kind of hardcore, for those who care about such things, kind of Western-oriented clinical evidence of these practices. He and his colleagues are the ones who created it. And the most interesting thing that I think he proved is that you do not need to be an expert. Anybody, a lot of people in his classes that he studied were beginners who had never meditated before. And, all you need to do is show up. You do not have to, be good at it, or whatever that might mean, or have a lot of experience with it. And you don't have to do a ton of it in order to get all the cognitive and mental health benefits and stress reduction benefits that have been proven to be the case for those who simply set aside a little bit of time to engage with the practice, or whatever their, skill level might be. So please, I hear all the time, I'm not cut out for meditation. And of course, I have to acknowledge it, people decide at the end of the day what they're going to do and what works for them and what they enjoy and what's meaningful. So I'm not here to prescribe meditation for everybody. I would encourage people to try to set aside the idea that they're not cut out for meditation, because probably what's happening is they're having the experience that we all have when we start to meditate, and they therefore conclude they're doing it wrong, when actually they're just doing it exactly as it tends to be when we're getting started. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I heard you say just now, and as I was listening to you, kind of the analytical part of my mind went to what's the takeaway from an action standpoint for the listener. And what I heard you say were two things, and we sort of touched on this first one before, which is to notice the reactivity, that's sort of the instinctual response, and to pause. And
yes,
either around that or before that, having a level of awareness that it's happening. So when you were talking and I heard those two things, my analytical brain went to, okay, well, if I can't meditate, what he's really saying is to operate in the world with a level of awareness that allows me to notice my instinctive mode of reacting and instead choose something different.
Yes. One way that I am summarizing my practice these days and what I'm offering to others is to greet the next moment with an open heart, right? So all of our ideas and judgments and, regrets and all those things are narrowing, the opportunity we have to respond to the next moment. They're constricting us. So if we can put those things down, then we are more open-hearted and minded with what the next moment might bring. And so, and it is good, whatever and it could be journaling, there's different practices that people find out what works for them, but it is good to cultivate that capacity outside of that, real life moment where we're getting triggered at Starbucks, right? Because if we haven't spent some time cultivating it, it's going to be really hard to access when our emotional triggers are getting plucked. So that's the encouragement for people to try to set aside sometime, in whatever format it turns out to be for you, to
Mhm.
cultivate this capacity for open-heartedness to the present moment, so that when we do get into that, sticky situation, we have these tools a little more readily accessible to us.
Mhm. The other thing that I was thinking when you were talking, and actually I've been thinking this a lot as you've been talking and describing sort of the way of being that you're sort of offering to people, is I was thinking about how Joe Dispenza talks about being in the quantum field and that whole
Mm-hmm.
idea of moving from and he talks about it in the context of meditation, and he often describes when he does his like go away events where people are there for like a week with him. And I had a couple of friends that have gone, and I guess the amount of meditating they do in these 7 day
Mm-hmm.
extensive. And
Mm-hmm.
he talks a lot about the physiological benefits, the opening of the cardiac veins and arteries and the flush to the heart of blood and some of the responses that people have. But he also talks a lot about this quantum field, and part of what I was especially when you were saying before, you're not really your physical body, the
Mm-hmm.
sense of oneness is beyond the container that you're living in, and sort of
Yeah.
recognizing that and appreciating that. And that's what made me think of, even for any of us, we can probably remember a time we were walking in nature, or we were at the beach, or we were just having this experience where our physical body was not what we were experiencing. We were sort of in that quantum field experiencing
Yeah.
oneness with
Yeah.
the oneness and wholeness of ourself. So is
Yeah.
sort of, does that jive at all with what
Yeah.
experience? And sort of like, I almost think of the
Absolutely.
quantum field as like you close your eyes and there's this magical gate, and you open it up and you're stepping out into this space, this ethereal space, and now you're in the quantum field where everything's possible and your identity doesn't matter. And I don't know, does that
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I mean, in one term we use in Buddhism is big mind, versus small
Mm,
mind. So it's reawakening to the fundamental truth of who and what we are and what's around us. And so and it is just kind of, reiterate and paraphrase what you were saying. It's like, if we have a moment where this idea of ourself and this identity we've kind of constructed in our mind about ourselves, if we could put that down for a minute, then the
mhm,
truth of ourselves is apparent. And
mm,
really, the truth of ourselves is we're not separate from the environment around us. We're not separate from other people. And, so this idea of the identity is what separates us.
right.
And so if we put that down, then the kind of readily apparent truth is right there. And it is the thing that you kind of pull it back, it is happening right here and now, right? It is, at least in, what I'm sharing is like, it's not in, some other place or some magical dimension. It's right here,
Mm,
actually in your body and on the ground and with the other people around you, that this truth is present. It's just a question of letting go of this conventional fixed view we have of ourselves and the people around us and the things around us, and opening ourselves up to what is actually here, where things are not separate, and not threatening,
mm.
and then we're, yeah, it's like we're in a totally different space, and yet here we are, right? It's actually no
Yeah.
different from being right here.
I think of it too, what you were just describing, and this didn't hit me before, but it's hitting me now, that feeling of being really authentic. And I think about this a
Mm,
lot when I work with yoga teachers and they feel like they're not really being themselves when they're teaching their classes.
mhm.
They feel
Yeah.
this pressure to, kind of be something that they're not, like similar to what I was describing before. And I can certainly say for me, those moments where I'm teaching a class and I'm really feeling present and grounded and 100% myself. And at the end of class, when everybody's in Shavasana and I'm looking out at the class, like sometimes I almost cry, because it's
Yeah. Yeah.
a beautiful experience of, I was so present and I was so comfortable and I was so authentic. And through that way of being, I connected in a way that I couldn't have if I was more in my head and more reactive and all the things we've talked about. And, my challenge is always, how do I describe what I did so that from a teachable standpoint, I can help other people. How do I sort of operationalize what I did so it becomes sort of a framework for maybe a newer yoga teacher who is super self-conscious and super nervous and super worried that people aren't going to like their class. And that's sort of the challenge. And I'm always looking for better ways to do that. But it just hit me. And of course, even in the context not of teaching yoga, in anything in our life, we want to operate in a way that we feel authentic. But all of what we talked about today sort of is that shield we put up. And yet, when we have those moments, we're at a party or we're doing a presentation at work or we have a conversation with our loved one, we're like, oh man, I was really myself. I really feel like this is who I want to be all the time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's such a shame. Like we think that people want to see the other, this other version of ourselves, right? But actually what we want, and certainly what I want to see, in others is their authentic self. And it takes a bit of faith and comfort, and we need to, allow each other that grace, right? And we come forth that way, and we can allow a broader spectrum of how people are being with us to invite that authenticity, and maybe a little more emotionality that isn't normally socially acceptable, or that kind of thing. And then we can, you know, be with each other in a different way that is actually how we really want to be.
Yeah.
All the social mores aside, it's like nobody really is dying for that. I think what we want is authenticity and connection.
Sure. When I think about it, I do a lot of social media. That's a big way that I connect with people: Instagram,
Yeah,
TikTok, YouTube, the podcast, obviously here. And I think about so many videos that go viral are moments where people either knowingly or intentionally were so honest and authentic. And it just is more proof of what you're talking about. That is what people want to see, not the pretty, not the, prim and proper, just the raw humanness. And those are the things that I think really get the reaction. And from like a scientific standpoint, it's just sort of proof that that is what people want to see.
that's so true.
It gives them, there's probably so many examples that come to mind. So, all right, I just want to make sure, there's so many other questions here I could have asked, but I just want to be sure we cover this one last thing. Just give me a sense, and the listener a sense of what's sort of the path of the book like, in the book, what are we doing as we read this book? What are sort of the topics? I know we obviously talked at a high level. Just give us anything you want to share about what's the experience of consuming this book.
Sure. So it's got a kind of arc to it where at the beginning we're talking about time and space and like kind of the building blocks of our lives, basically, situating ourselves here on the earth and so forth. And then we move into our kind of the activities of our life: work, play, relationships, etc. And then we kind of move on to, like, my book coach gave me the idea, it's like a hero's journey, right? Which is kind of a cliche, but it's also true. And in the end, we move into kind of what some call transcendence, even though transcendence is really actually just coming back to what is already right here. We're not actually transcending anything, but we're reconnecting with what's true. And so that's kind of the narrative arc of the book. And then each chapter has three kind of primary components, which, by the way, made it easier to write once I kind of figured out this structure for anybody out there who's thinking about writing something in a longer format. But so one is the Buddhist, teach different lenses for looking at this central truth of emptiness, which is kind of a key theme of the book. So I talk about suffering, I talk about equanimity, I talk about mindfulness, etc. So that's all in there. Then there are practices, right? Meditation practices, guided practices for cultivating. So it's one thing to have an intellectual understanding. It's another thing to really practice it and feel it in our bones and really kind of embody the teaching and the wisdom. So that's what the mindfulness practice and meditation practices are for. And then there's each chapter opens with an autobiographical vignette from my life. So for one thing, to let the reader know who's presenting this to them, and where is this really coming from and why. But also to show, I hope, that this only means something to the extent it connects with the nitty-gritty of our real day-to-day life, the ups and the downs, and the successes and the failures, and the actual life that we actually have is where this teaching and these practices really need to land. And so I try to offer my own life as an example of that so that folks can hopefully see a few things that they can relate to and connect with in their own lives. And so that's the basic structure of the book. There are audio recordings of the guided meditations on my website at billywynne.com. On the meditation tab, you'll find almost verbatim the exact same meditations in the book are there recorded, so folks can listen rather than look at a page while they're trying to do the meditation.
That's great. I love when things kind of can come to life. So you're sort of reading it, and then there's a couple things that make the principles come to life and little exercises you can do. I think that makes for a more interactive experience than just reading. Well, this has been so much fun. I really thank you for your time. This has been enlightening. I actually feel inspired now. In the next time Ben goes to get his haircut, I'm not going to say anything. Definitely going to be more aware. I think all of the themes that we've talked about here are just so good for everybody to hear. So thank you so much. Let's do a couple things before we wrap up. Of course, I'm going to share the links in the show notes. Just tell people verbally, where are they getting your book? Remind us the name of your book and what's the best way to connect with you on the social media or your website. So go ahead and just let us know what that is.
Thank you very much. So the book is The Empty Path: Finding Fulfillment Through the Radical Art of Lessening, and it's available anywhere online that you get books. There's the big one that we all know about. There's also bookshop.org and Barnes & Noble and other online passageways. It probably is available if you have a larger bookstore nearby, or you can go to your local smaller independent bookstore and ask them to order it for you is another way to get it. The audiobook actually came out today, so it's on Audible, and if you have a subscription to that in particular, it's a good way to get it. I'm the reader of the book, which was a lot of fun. And so you can find it that way. billywynne.com is my website. Also, links to buying the book, of course, are on my website, and the audio recordings of the guided.
WYNNE.
Yes, thank you. WY like Yankee NNE.com. And you can also find links to my social. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. What else am I on? Twitter, LinkedIn. Instagram is really kind of the bread and butter social that I use for this purpose. So you can find me there. And I have a newsletter, so people can keep in touch with me and follow me as much as they would like.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. This will go up. Today is Tuesday. This will go live Monday, this coming Monday. Great. So I'll send you the link. We'll also take the video part. We'll put it on YouTube. So I'll send you on my YouTube channel. I'll send you the link to that. And I'm really excited to share this. I mean, we didn't talk too much. I mean, obviously, from the title of my podcast, it is Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I will just say, everything we're talking about is about the human experience. I just also think because it's got the connection to Buddhism, which is obviously part of the fundamentals of yoga practice, yoga teaching, I think it will have great relevancy to my listeners. Also, just, all of us as human beings need to know more about everything that you're talking about. So thank you. And I can't send it to you on Monday.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I look forward to that. This has been a pleasure. Great chatting with you. Good luck with everything.
All right. Take care. Bye for now.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks for being here with me today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And hey, one more thing. While I don't know you personally, I know what a yoga teacher looks like who's ready to have a breakthrough to being the kind of yoga teacher who walks around the room, sharing cues you know the reason for, understands anatomy, teaching signature sequences without notes or any need to practice with class, and loves teaching yoga without stress, anxiety, or nervousness. If you are ready to be that yoga teacher, here is your next step. DM me the words podcast offer, and I will give you a special incentive to work with me inside of my signature program just because you are listening to the podcast. DM me on Instagram at Bare Bones Yoga. I can't wait to hear from you.